So I got a lot of food for free today from the Salvation Army, extra foods, and oh, Cecil wants some food. Yeah, he's like, food! So anyway, I haven't tried these salads yet, but I'm going to launch into that. I've disinfected everything, the outside of it, and by the time they were trying to really hurry things through this week to serve as many people faster, which is very appreciated actually. So I'm not complaining about it, but I had a hard time, like once I got to the pick 10 section, I had to be hurrying along, and I really, like, I wanted the coconut milk and I wanted the steel cut oats, and then I was like, what else do I grab? And I grabbed a bunch of, well, this is good, the tomato paste concentrate, because I can make waffle pizzas for James with that. But I picked out a bunch of cookies and stuff and some muffin mix. I don't know what I was thinking.
You picked up a lot of incredible
produce.
Healthy.
Yes. So I could have taken as much of this baby corn as I wanted, and I'm like, well, how much is James gonna eat? So I picked out 3 packages of it, but I could have picked out probably a case of it. They had a lot of it. And the mushrooms, I picked out, you know, a couple different kinds, and then some bread for James. So I guess I could make pizzas out of that stuff. And they were giving away oranges by the case, so I grabbed, so that was 6 bags of those, but I had to throw out 12 of the oranges, so that, like,
in other words, they'd
gone already. And he really wants food. Yeah. So limes, some tomatoes, raspberries, strawberries, golden berries, and mangoes. So I picked out awesome stuff, and I'm going to put it away shortly. I just want to take a little break to feed my little guy some water. I didn't bring out his egg yet, but you can go ahead and talk, James, while I'm doing that, because he really wants some water. He's like, come on now.
He wants something.
I've been waiting while you've been getting some groceries. Come on, little sucker. Okay. You can go ahead and talk.
So a while back I was talking about this book put out by Lonely Planet. It's quite good.
There we go, Cecil.
On Pakistan. And you know, I was focusing on the negative, and it's important to focus on negatives and not.
I need you to open it. There we go.
Not slide over.
There we go, Cecil.
Stuff. So Pakistan means land of the pure. Now Pakistan, so we were pointing out how there were warnings for pretty well every major political division in Pakistan. This Pakistan is unacceptable.
You're such a good
You've got to start behaving like the civilization you once were. Like the civilization of Pakistan, the Indus Valley civilization, or the Harappan civilization, Mohenjo-Daro civilization, however you pronounce that last thing. It was the 3rd civilization to be developed by humankind. And what happened? Well, what happened is things got too pure. What really happened, you see how things go places, is cosmopolitanism. Now that's a dirty word for a lot of people, especially for people who are of the Soviet persuasion. What that meant for the Soviets was
really pooped it up while I was gone.
To be Jewish.
Really pooped it up.
And that's why, one of the reasons why I like using that term, because to be Jewish is kind of like a bad word nowadays, a bad concept with faux gauches. And of course, right-wingers are not very enthused about the Jews. That's an understatement.
But not just now. Now you
so it's just really kind of like, doesn't matter where people are swinging from, except maybe with the globalists. It's just bad to be Jewish. But you know, apparently the nationality with the highest per capita IQ is the Jewish nation. I'm not talking about Israel only. Apparently it's around the world. It's an average, of course. There'll be people who let the side down, as it
There we go.
And generally, if you look at the general run of things, you'll find out that Jews have, as promised to Abraham in the Bible, I don't think the promise actually existed, but there is that promise there that the world would be blessed by Jews. And yes, in the long run of things, the world has been blessed by Jews. Whatever country has accepted Jews has benefited from them. Germany used to get the plurality of Nobel Prizes up until World War II. They ethnically cleansed them, then whacked a huge number of them, and now it's not Germany that gets the plurality of Nobel Prizes. What's the country that ultimately let at least Jewish scientists in? Albert Einstein went to Princeton. Fermi was married to a Jew. He came from Italy, but he ended up in Chicago, as I recall, the University of Chicago. There are many other examples. Now it's the United States that wins the plurality of Nobel Prizes. You see how things swung, and swung big time.
You're going to stay here beside James
with World War II.
Get a little bit of fresh air.
Jews bless, on average, whatever society lets them in. So cosmopolitanism, that's what we should be striving for, not being pure. When you're pure, it's not a pure delight. And that's what happened with Pakistan. Many, it happened in India too, with the Mughal Empire, and before. The Delhi Sultanate, Tamerlane, when he came in, hammered Delhi. New Delhi didn't exist back then. That was around 1400 AD. He took tons of slaves, destroyed temples, right, left, and center. Shameful legacy. And it would have started with around 711 AD with the destruction of temples, Hindu temples, destruction of Buddhist sites, observatories around Ujjain, or in Ujjain. I'm probably mispronouncing it severely, accent probably on the wrong syllable. But there was an observatory with a library there. It got destroyed more than once, and stuff like that. So you do that with this impressive tradition. This is the tradition. This came out of Pakistan, not just out of India, or the area that's now called Pakistan. It's a misnomer to call it Pakistan. It's a misnomer to call it India. But Bharat would be a better designation for all of these, for both of these locations, and Bangladesh too. So this amazing tradition, the tradition that developed independently of the Mayans, the concept zero, developed the concept of negative numbers, helped with the development, from what I gather, of algebra. The idea that the Arabs developed algebra, or the Muslims developed algebra, is kind of quaint, I gather. You know, like I was talking to a mathematician a while back who, now understand, algebra is an Arabic term, but you know, like we call the Arabic numerals, they're not Arabic numerals, they came from India. The Arabs were kind of like a conduit for it to pass over to the so-called West. But, you know, so I was saying, well, at least the Arabs, the Muslims developed algebra, you know, to this guy. Or at least they developed a system of abbreviation, you know, where we use symbols instead of words for equations and stuff like that. And he kind of laughed a little bit. You know, it was kind of a rueful laugh. And he said, you know, if you actually look at it, you'll find out that the Greeks were actually doing it, and that the Arabs went backwards with it. It's appalling. You know, it's another case, I'm sad to say, where the faux gauches have made things up, and you know, it's all to make the West look bad. For example, there's this idea going around that, wow, one of the best things that ever happened for the West was the Turks taking over Constantinople, turning it into Istanbul, because what happened was all these guys in the Byzantine area, you know, they took the Greek with them. They were refugees, and I'm going, well, that ain't so cool. They had to be refugees from the Turks, and it's probably good they didn't stay behind, because a lot of them got whacked when the Turks took over the Byzantine Empire. You read the sources, and they'll say, hey, here was a city, a Greek city, and now it's just a wasteland. Now, the Turks aren't the only people who did that. I mean, someone once said about the Romans, they made a wasteland and called it peace. Now, I don't want to be singling out any particular group, but I do want to be pointing out when particular groups were doing... don't be too skeptical when I say evil, or, well, it's cynical. Of course, it's not skepticism on the part of the faux gauches. Axis of evil, North Korea. If you don't realize North Korea is evil, your moral compass doesn't even exist. It's not even screwed in the wrong direction, you stupid faux gauches with your stupid faux gaucherie. Wow, it's evil. And I'm telling you, I don't care if George Bush said it. You don't understand that they're passing the technology around. You don't have a clue. You have no moral compass. You know, it's because George Bush breathes and thinks breathing is good for him and for everyone. Doesn't mean I'm going to hold my breath, turn blue, and suffocate myself to death, you stupid putzes. At any rate, back to Pakistan. The general genetic pool of people in Pakistan is the same genetic pool. There's been an admixture of Afghans and Turks and Persians and some Arabs and some Mongols actually into the mix. But we're not going to dwell on that. What we're going to dwell on is the culture, and the gene pool is basically the same as it was, let's say, 4,000 years ago or more, when the Indus Valley civilization was starting to cook. It's misdated. It's misdated, I'm afraid, severely, and that's because of some bad misdating by Egyptologists and some, by extension, misdating of radiocarbon readings. Best to just take raw readings. You know, what we do is, or what radiocarbon experts do, carbon-14 experts do, in order to please the Egyptologists. They don't realize it because that pleasuring, shall we say, happened in the mid-50s, and they don't, the radiocarbon experts aren't expert enough to know where the history of their own discipline, or in this case, a lack of discipline. And so they, what they do is they add, you know, hundreds of years to stuff if it's like before 500 BC, up to 500 years, or maybe even more, just to please the Egyptologists. That's originally, they were pleasuring the Egyptologists. They don't realize it now. So you just got to be careful about it, and not accept the ad hoc adding of dates, and you just take the raw reading, you know, and generally they give you a pretty good idea of what's happening. So King Tut's stuff from King Tut's tomb, dated conventionally to roughly 1350 BC, And when they actually did some radiocarbon readings from it, it tested out to be roughly 890 BC and 850 BC. So somewhere in that that territory. It's best to go with a little less than 500 years discrepancy. That's the discrepancy between 1350 BC and 850 BC, or 1350 BC and 890 BC. The radiocarbon readings will give you a rough figure, but the raw readings are enough for us to just throw out the conventional dating, Egyptian dating system, and anything by extension. The dating system's actually spread to Mesopotamia. It spread to the Indus Valley civilization, and it goes beyond the silliness that comes from Egyptologists accepting Herodotus' date, rough date for the Trojan War. That is the thing that really screws up the end of the Egyptian dating system, the end of the late Bronze Age. But the beginning was screwed up by another Egyptologist who's supposed to be a genius. He's a genius at self-promotion, shall we say, a guy called Sir, or classified as Sir, misclassified. And Flinders Petrie, one of the stupider fools to ever come down the pike. Yeah, he was careful about his doing the archaeological stuff, but that's what you expect from anyone who's actually doing a good job. Yeah, he was better than the flunkies who came before him. But that doesn't make him a genius. He donated his brain to science, and someone maybe we didn't like him, lost his brain, or maybe it just got lost in the shuffle. It was during World War II, I gather, when he died and donated his brain to science. So it probably was no worse than anyone else's. You know, it's not really the hardware that matters, it's the software that matters when it comes to how the brain functions. And one of the worst things you can do is go around strutting without doing the proper work. Strutting around saying that you're better than, like your brain, you're born better than everyone else. That would be the idea behind donating his brain to science. He was a thoroughgoing racist, and when I use the word racist, I do not use it, I don't use it just like at random. I don't use it just, wow, you know, like is every other word, oh, that's racist, oh, that's racist, you know. When I use it about Sir Flinders Petrie, he was a racist. I don't believe in using you know, like meaning inflation. I don't believe in that. Hitler was a racist. You know, like Mussolini would have been a racist. Sir Flinders Petrie was a racist. He believed that, along with some French flunkey's name is not worth preserving, maybe that's why I can't remember it, they believed that civilization couldn't have developed independently in Egypt, because, I guess, it's in Africa. Huh? What a silly idea. What a foolish concept. So he was trying mightily to find some sort of source for civilization in Egypt, in Europe. Wasn't able to quite do it, but he had to settle for a second best by finding it in Asia, in Mesopotamia. It's a bad identification. Anyway, here's the challenge for Pakistan. People in Pakistan, there are civilized people there, but they're not in the vast majority. You know, it's not in your genes or anything like that. It's in this concept, Pakistan. The whole idea is to try and get ideas from all around the world, to be impure, to get ideas, to be cosmopolitan. That's what the so-called West did. I call it the rest, because what the West did was got ideas from the rest. So Chinese developed printing, and you know, like what the West did, or the rest did, was said, hey, ultimately that's a good idea. It took a while for it to make it to the West. They developed into a printing press, But you see, the Chinese never got over that horrible writing system. I mean, it's very artistic and that sort of stuff. You can get about 6,000 or 7,000 symbols. How does that help you out? Hey, guy, you know, like, can you grab the number 5,300th symbol for printing up? Now, this is to write literary stuff. To write a newspaper, you probably only need like 2,000 symbols. But hey, grab symbol number 1,523. Okay, can you run it over here for us? You know, you can't put it on a typewriter or stuff like that. It's amazing, you know. But printing, you'd have a little symbol for each one of these things. You know, it's a little bit different when you got, like with English, 26 letters in the alphabet. Where did that come from? You know, like the Greeks didn't invent that. You know, they were, according to their own account, they were colonized, not just imperialized by people from Asia. And they called them the Phoenicians. Came from present-day Lebanon. See, here's a challenge for Lebanon. Why are you a basket case as a country? Well, it's because you've got people who are trying to be too pure. You know, up until around the time Pauline was born, Lebanon was the pride of the Middle East. And then a certain ethnic group that had been the majority and had been a little bit more, shall we say, impure, had been a little more cosmopolitan. They had been the majority, and all of a sudden they were surpassed by another group that just doesn't believe in, on average, doesn't believe in cosmopolitanism. And it's been fighting ever since. So that's been more than a generation. It would be about a generation and a half, with no sign of things getting better. You look at Beirut, and it's a basket case right now. You look at Lebanon, basket case. It wasn't always that way. That's where we're told, and I think it might be to a certain extent true. The alphabet was at least made better, you know, like improved upon, polished up. I think it looks as though it was came out of Egypt originally, and I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if it actually was developed by a dude called Moses. And yeah, I'm very skeptical about any religious document and stuff like that. But I'm telling you, there's a context, not just for Moses. There's a context, not just a context. There's a context for Joseph. There's a context for Abraham. You know, like the context is, I don't know whether a guy called Abraham existed, but the context exists. You know, like what happens is there's an invasion of the area that he's in. I guess we could call it Canaan or something like that. And there are 4 kings that come from Mesopotamia. And the first among equals is a guy called Chedorlaomer. And they realize that's Kutter, no mercy. And he's called an Elamite king, and I was giving you the translation from Elamite.
There we go.
Well, geez, I think there's only one record or one dynasty recorded that ever ruled Babylon or Babylonia or Mesopotamia that would have the power to come all the way through Mesopotamia. And I think the biblical account has them going all the way down to the Red Sea. Coming all the way down the Fertile Crescent. That's impressive. And when was it? It's way back when in the Sumerian king list. It's when the Sumerians still existed. One of the kings that comes down is called the king of Shinar, and it's recognized, and I think appropriately, that that's the king of Sumer, but he's not the first among equals. It's the king of Elam. So we don't know the names of these dudes. We've just got a record that in the Sumerian king list that there were 3 of them in a row. And that's the context. Abraham, it wasn't a, they say Amraphel, who's one of these 4 among equals. That's Hammurabi. Oh my God. You know, I've taken enough linguistics. I've taken quite a few linguistics courses to know that's a garbage identification. You cannot say that that's, oh, that's Hammurabi, Amraphel. No. It could be.
You want more?
You know, names get screwed up.
More?
But, you know, on the basis of that, I'm not going to go like say, wow, okay, that's when Abraham stated.
Here's the scene.
You ask someone to memorize a phone book, And what's the some thing that just goes out the window? It's the numbers.
You want more?
Unless they're really got some memorization techniques. What's the next thing? It's actually the names. What sticks with a person? It's a thing like what to do in an emergency. It's the stories. It's the stories. What to do in an emergency. And it's the story that's important about Abraham. It's the story of the 4 kings.
You want more? More of this?
And that's when Abraham was, a long time ago, well before 2000 BC. I'd say before 2500 BC. And then, how about Joseph? Well, okay, there's this funny story. It's an Egyptian vizier, but he's a foreigner. Presumably, he's got a foreign god in his name. It's a theophoric name, and a name that bears a god's name in it. The name is Imhotep. Well, what did he do? Oh, he helped save the Egyptians from 7 years of famine. And he was the vizier. He was second in command to the pharaoh. Joseph is the name of the dude. Probably mispronouncing it, but there you go. And he's the guy, Joseph was the guy who had the first pyramid built for him. The story goes that the first pyramid was designed for him by this Imhotep. Not just a vizier, but something of an architect. So they recognize, is what they call him a Syrian god, but you'll find the Assyrians worshipped I am. It's kind of like a storm god. Oh, you know, like if you look really carefully at the name, which looks weird, it looks like a plural in the Bible. The name for God, Elohim. You see, how would the Assyrians, how would the Babylonians have written How did they? They'd write it with what they call a determinative before, a determinative that indicated it was a god, that was a god. And they think in some cases the determinatives weren't pronounced, some they were. And I'm telling you that what the Hebrews did was they pronounced it. And how would they write it? Elohim. Now, it's well understood with the cuneiform stuff that they left off H's and Y's and W's. So what happens? Ilu, I-L-U. We know there's an H there. Because we know with Allah, there's an H there. It means the God, the single God. It's got an H there in the original Semitic. So all of a sudden we've got I-L-U-H. And then we've got Im afterwards. And then when you look at the Assyrian and Babylonian, you find out it's a matter of indifference when you get an I, whether it's an I or an E. So we put an E there for I-L-U-H, and we've got E-L-U-H. And then we find out, holy smokes, when we look at Hebrew and the way it's written, it's a matter of indifference whether you've got a U or an O. The O's were added later. Oh, like maybe as late as 500 AD. So all of a sudden we've got, for I-L-U, we got I-L-U-H, and then we've got E-L-U-H, and then we got E-L-O-H. Oh, we've got, and then the I am, we've got Elohim. So actually God, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew God is actually Im. He's generally a Semitic god. You'll find him in Assyria. I believe you'd find him in Babylonia. And they say he's a Syrian god. So there you go. He was also actually the Jewish god. Okay? So, yeah.